Have you ever caught yourself saying, I just don't have the energy for people like I used to? Maybe it was after a phone call that left you feeling more tired than uplifted, or after a visit where you smiled politely but secretly counted down the minutes until you could just be home again, alone, in peace. If that sounds familiar, I want you to know something straight from the heart. You're not alone. And more importantly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. In fact, what you're experiencing might be one of the most natural, deeply human changes that comes with getting older, and it's rooted in psychology, emotional wisdom, and self-respect. See, something begins to shift after 60. Not all at once, not overnight, but quietly, like the soft dimming of a busy world. You start to notice what no longer feels right. You begin to sense which conversations lift you up, and which ones just wear you down. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you begin to pull back, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. You begin to avoid people more often, not because you're bitter, not because you're shutting down, but because your spirit is telling you it's time to make room for yourself. Let's talk about that, because this isn't about isolation. It's not about sadness or loneliness. This is about understanding yourself better than ever before. It's about honoring your time, your energy, your peace. One of the first and most powerful reasons this change happens is actually very simple. Your energy becomes more sacred. When you were younger, maybe you could handle running around all day, squeezing in coffee dates, phone calls, errands, family visits, and still feel like you had some fuel left in the tank. But now, that energy is gold, and you're no longer interested in spending it on anything or anyone that drains you. It's not selfish. It's smart. Just like we become wiser with money as we age, we also become wiser with our emotional investments. Every interaction costs something, and over time you learn to ask, is this worth my energy? Is this conversation lifting me, or is it leaving me heavy? You begin to choose quiet mornings over loud gatherings, walks in nature over noisy dinners, one deep, meaningful conversation over 10 shallow ones. And that's not a loss. It's a gain. You're gaining presence. You're gaining intention. Another reason you might find yourself avoiding people more is because your heart has learned something very important. Not every relationship needs to be maintained forever. In youth, we're taught to keep up appearances, be polite, stay connected, say yes. But now, you've lived enough life to know it's okay to outgrow people. It's okay to distance yourself from someone who no longer aligns with your peace. You've earned the right to choose your circle, and even more so to choose your solitude. And that solitude, it starts feeling different. It doesn't feel lonely. It feels rich, grounded, full. You begin to notice the joy in simple things. A quiet sunrise, a favorite chair, the silence of your own breathing. You don't need noise. You don't crave attention. You're not chasing validation anymore. You've already proven enough. You've already given enough. There's a deeper truth here, one many people never talk about. As we age, we start to turn inward, not because we're disappearing, but because we're coming home. Home to our thoughts, home to our memories, home to our values. And that inward turn naturally shifts how we relate to others. You might notice you no longer tolerate gossip, arguments, or meaningless chatter. It's not that you've become difficult. It's that your spirit no longer has room for what doesn't feed it. You want truth, you want peace, you want realness. So yes, you might stop going to certain events. You might take longer to reply to messages. You might even avoid certain people altogether, but not out of malice, out of a deeper knowing, a knowing that your time is precious, that your peace is worth protecting. And here's something else to consider. Your world changes too. Friends move away, some grow distant, others are no longer here. That circle you once had, it's not as full as it used to be, and that too contributes to the quiet. But the beautiful part is, in that quiet, you begin to hear yourself more clearly, and what you hear is strong, what you hear is wise. So if you find yourself pulling back from social scenes, choosing stillness, or preferring your own company, don't question it, don't fight it, and above all, don't feel guilty about it, because what you're really doing is making space, space for peace, space for healing, space for a version of you that finally knows you don't need to be everywhere, with everyone, all the time. You just need to be where your heart feels safe. And that, my friend, is not avoidance. That is alignment. There's something almost liberating about not needing to explain yourself anymore. When you were younger, maybe you felt pressure to show up, even when your heart wasn't in it. To smile when you didn't feel like it. To stay in friendships that drained you just because walking away felt too complicated. But now, you begin to understand one of life's most freeing truths. Not every connection is meant to last forever, and not every silence needs to be filled. And it's in that silence, when the phone isn't ringing, when no one's knocking on your door, when your calendar finally has space, that you begin to breathe a little deeper. You might realize that your spirit is finally catching up to your soul, that all those years you spent being everything to everyone else were beautiful, yes, but exhausting too. So when someone says, "You've changed," you don't argue anymore. You just smile. Because yes, you have changed, and in all the ways that matter. Another shift that happens, one that many people don't notice at first, is how your tolerance for emotional clutter gets lower. The drama, the guilt trips, the people who only reach out when they need something, it all becomes too loud. Your emotional hearing gets sharper with age. You can sense tension from a mile away. You can tell when a conversation is heading nowhere, and you don't feel the need to fix it or rescue anyone from it. That's not indifference. That's maturity. That's peace protecting itself. And if we're being honest, you've earned the right to protect your peace. Let's be real. Life gets quieter after 60, sometimes painfully so. You may have said goodbye to loved ones. Maybe you retired from a job that once gave you purpose. Maybe your children have moved away, building their own worlds. And in that stillness, you might feel a little invisible. But here's the powerful truth. Being less visible to the world doesn't mean you're any less valuable. In fact, it often means you're stepping into a new kind of presence. One that doesn't scream for attention. One that radiates from within. You begin to realize that the most meaningful conversations you'll ever have may be with yourself. That the loudest love you'll ever feel may come from quietly accepting who you are without conditions. And the most healing moments? They come when you stop chasing others and start embracing yourself. It's also worth mentioning how emotional wisdom begins to take the lead as we get older. You know the signs of burnout. You recognize the people who give you joy and the ones who only call when they need something. And without saying a word, your instincts guide you. You might stop replying to certain messages. You might choose not to return that call, not because you're angry, but because you're listening to something deeper now. You don't need to be in every room to feel relevant. You don't need to attend every event to prove you care. You've lived enough life to know that presence isn't about being seen. It's about being whole. And that brings us to another subtle but powerful reason we start avoiding people as we age. Our values shift. Things that once mattered. How many people liked us, who invited us to what, whether we were included, suddenly feel distant, even a little silly. You stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I feel good when I'm around them?" It's a radical shift from approval-seeking to self-honoring, and it changes everything. The need for constant connection fades, and in its place grows something much richer: discernment. You start to ask better questions. Does this person respect my time? Do they bring peace into my life or just noise? Do I feel heard, or am I always the one listening? And when the answers aren't what you hoped, They don't break you. They free you. So you pull back, not out of fear, but out of truth. You become selective, not picky, selective. You want quality, not quantity, depth, not density, and you become okay with missing out on things that don't serve your growth. You also start valuing simplicity, not just in relationships, but in life as a whole. You don't need constant updates or social media highlights. You find joy in watching birds at the feeder, in walking through your garden, in sitting down to a good book you've already read 3 times. You begin to realize that happiness was never in the crowd. It was in the calm. This change may confuse others. They might say you're becoming distant, cold even. But let me remind you again, you are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. You are choosing stillness in a world that glorifies noise. You are choosing peace in a world that demands performance. You are choosing you, finally, fully, and unapologetically. And that is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to be deeply proud of. So if your days are quieter now, if your phone doesn't buzz like it used to, if your weekends feel less full and more spacious, that's not emptiness. That's life making room for what truly matters. And in that room, you find yourself again. Not the version that was busy pleasing everyone. Not the version that was always available, but the version that breathes slower, smiles softer, and lives deeper. That version doesn't need to explain why she no longer goes out as much, why he doesn't return every call, why they now choose silence over surface. That version just knows. And then, something even more powerful begins to happen. The silence you once feared, or maybe even fought against, starts to feel like a trusted friend. It no longer feels like you're missing out. It feels like you're tuning into a version of yourself that no longer needs outside noise to feel full. That kind of peace doesn't arrive overnight. It grows quietly, like a garden planted by years of experience, watered by loss, and warmed by every lesson you've ever had to learn the hard way. It's in this stage of life that many people also experience a growing need for reflection. You begin to look back, not in regret, but in gratitude. You remember people who came and went. Some helped you grow, others helped you let go. You begin to understand why certain relationships faded. You stop blaming yourself for connections that couldn't survive the storm, and instead of clinging to the past, you carry the wisdom forward, quietly choosing to protect your peace above all else. There's also the matter of how your body feels. Aging isn't always graceful. There are aches where there used to be strength, fatigue where there used to be fire, and sometimes just getting out the door feels like more effort than it's worth. You find yourself weighing every invitation against your comfort. That's not antisocial. That's awareness. You start asking, will this add to my life, or will it take away from my energy? And more often, the answer leads you back home. To your favorite chair, to your quiet hobbies, to your safe routine. And that's okay. That's more than okay. But here's where the magic lies. Even in your quiet, even in your solitude, you are still deeply connected to life. You might not speak to 10 people a day anymore, but when you do speak, it means something. You might not go out often, but when you do, it feels intentional. You begin to see that your presence isn't diminished. It's distilled, purified, more focused, more meaningful. You may have fewer friends, but they are real ones. The kind who don't need small talk, who don't mind silence, who understand when you say, I just needed some space. These are the connections that matter now, the ones that feel like a gentle hand on your shoulder, not a weight pulling you in directions you no longer wish to go. And still, you might find moments when you worry. Am I isolating too much? Should I be trying harder to stay connected? It's a valid question, and the answer isn't the same for everyone. But here's something you can hold on to. If your alone time feels like restoration, not loneliness, if your quiet feels nourishing, not empty, then you're exactly where you need to be. Avoiding people isn't always running away. Sometimes it's returning to yourself. You've lived through so many seasons. Seasons of noise, of duty, of being needed by everyone. Now you get to have a season of stillness, a season of you. That is not a retreat from life. That is a reclamation of it. And you know what else happens when you honor that stillness? You start to notice things again. The breeze on your skin, the taste of your morning coffee, the sound of birds outside your window. You become more present, not less. You become more alive, not withdrawn. Because you're no longer distracted by the unnecessary. You've chosen to live in what's real, and that, my friend, is something not many people ever get to feel. You've earned it. So if you're listening to this and nodding along, feeling seen, feeling understood, I want you to take this as a quiet confirmation. You're not strange for avoiding people more now. You're not broken. You're not missing anything. You are evolving. And in that evolution, you are finding a life that feels softer, slower, and surprisingly richer. So let yourself turn down the volume. Let yourself disappear from things that no longer bring you joy. Let yourself be quiet, be alone, be selective, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for your peace, love for your time, love for this version of you that has carried so much and is finally learning how to set it all down. And if anyone ever asks why you're not as social as you used to be, just smile and tell them, because I finally know what peace feels like, and I'm not willing to give it up. Before you go, I want to remind you of this. The most beautiful part of growing older isn't what you lose. It's what you gain. You gain wisdom. You gain clarity. You gain the courage to say no, and the grace to say yes only to what feels right. And in that, there's freedom. If this spoke to you, if it helped you understand your own journey a little more, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your story, your insight. It could comfort someone else who's walking this same path. And if you'd like more videos like this, warm, real, and made with care, please hit the like button and subscribe, because there's still so much more to explore, and I'd be honored to walk through it with you. Here's to living with more peace, more intention, and more quiet joy at every age. You are not alone. You are simply becoming more yourself, and that's the most powerful thing of all.